Have you ever felt like relationships, no matter how loving, often come with a hidden weight? The constant need to compromise, to explain, to be available, to meet expectations. At first, it feels like connection, but over time, it can feel like a quiet erosion of your own peace. Whether you're 35 and burnt out from modern dating, or 65 and rethinking the idea of companionship altogether, you're not alone. More people today are asking a brave question. What if being alone isn't a problem, but the beginning of peace? Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. When we cling to people, to their love, their presence, their validation, we suffer when they change or leave. But when we learn to let go, we find something even more precious: inner stability. This video is for anyone tired of emotional noise and ready to discover the quiet power of living alone. Self-discovery, solitude as a path to knowing yourself. Once the noise of attachment fades, something unexpected begins to emerge. Silence. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels honest. And in that silence, something powerful happens. You start to hear yourself again. Most of us go through life surrounded by distractions, relationships, responsibilities, routines. We pour our energy into others, pleasing them, understanding them, saving them, or sometimes just surviving alongside them. But how much of that same energy have we ever given to ourselves? Solitude creates the space for a different kind of relationship, the one we've often neglected, the relationship with our own mind, heart, and spirit. When you're alone, there's no one to perform for, no one to impress, no one to hide behind. Instead of bending yourself to fit someone else's expectations, you begin to ask the deeper questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly want? What parts of me have been silenced by the noise of connection? For someone in their 30s or 40s, this might be the first time you've had a moment to pause. After a divorce, a career burnout, or the quiet realization that chasing love hasn't brought you home to yourself. For someone in their 50s or 60s, this could come after decades of giving to a family, a spouse, or a society that never taught you how to rest. Regardless of age, the journey inward begins the same way, with stillness. Buddhism teaches that self-knowledge is not something you find in a book. It is discovered in the space between thoughts, in the quiet observation of who you are beneath your roles. And solitude is the perfect environment for that observation to flourish. It may start simply. You sit with a cup of tea without rushing to check your phone. You notice how your body breathes when no one else is around. You find joy in walking slowly, in eating mindfully, in reading something that stirs your soul, not just fills your time. And then, something even more radical happens. You begin to enjoy your own company. You laugh at your own thoughts. You cry, not out of sadness, but because something deep inside you is finally being seen. You realize you've been searching for something out there that has quietly lived in here all along. Solitude isn't about cutting the world off. It's about making enough space to finally meet yourself. Not the version shaped by the people around you, but the truth of who you are when nothing is being asked of you. And here's the irony. The more time you spend with yourself, the more clarity you gain about the kind of connections that actually serve your growth. You no longer enter relationships out of loneliness. You choose them with intention. You don't need someone to complete you. You want someone to walk beside you, not carry you. Self-discovery isn't always comfortable. Sometimes, you'll confront old fears. You'll notice restlessness, emotional residue from the past, or deep-seated beliefs that never truly belong to you. But the longer you stay present, the more those layers soften, and the clearer your essence becomes. Solitude, in its highest form, is not a retreat from life. It's a return to yourself. And once you know who you truly are, no relationship, no job, no situation can take that away from you. Because peace that comes from self-awareness is unshakable. And the path to that peace begins in the quiet space where you finally hear you. Freedom and simplicity, the quiet joy of living life on your own terms. When you begin to know yourself more deeply, something inside naturally shifts. You no longer crave the noise. You no longer chase what once felt essential. Instead, you begin to long for a different kind of life. Not louder, not fuller, but simpler. And with simplicity comes freedom. Living alone offers a kind of freedom that most people never truly experience, not because it's rare, but because it's often misunderstood. It's not the freedom to escape responsibility or isolate from others. It's the freedom to live on your own terms, to choose how your energy flows, and to shape your days in harmony with your own rhythm. There's a quiet joy in waking up and deciding, without negotiation, how you'll spend your morning. There's peace in eating when you're hungry, sleeping when you're tired, and working or resting without anyone else's schedule dictating your movements. This simplicity isn't about doing less. It's about doing what matters more, and doing it with clarity. For many, especially in midlife or later years, this freedom is both a revelation and a return. After decades of compromising with partners, children, bosses, or expectations, to finally arrive at a space where you can breathe as yourself. It feels sacred. You no longer have to explain why you need silence. You don't need to justify your spiritual practice, your reading habits, your morning routine, or your need for solitude. You simply live, fully, gently, and without apology. Buddhism often speaks of the middle path, a way of life that's not indulgent, but also not ascetic. This middle path is deeply rooted in simplicity, not forced minimalism, but the kind of inner clarity that naturally lets go of what is unnecessary. When you live alone, you start to notice what you genuinely need and how little of it is material. You value your space, your time, your energy. You learn to say no with grace and yes with intention. And over time, your outer life reflects your inner state, uncluttered, calm, and free. This freedom also extends to how you spend your emotional energy. Relationships, even healthy ones, require a certain level of emotional labor, listening, compromising, managing moods. But when you're alone, that energy returns to you. You can redirect it toward creativity, reflection, healing, or simply rest. It doesn't mean you stop loving others. It just means you love without losing yourself. You can still care, still connect, still give, but from a place of fullness, not depletion. This kind of life is not a retreat from society. It's an invitation to engage with it more honestly. Because when you're not constantly adapting to others, you show up more authentically. You speak more truthfully. You listen more deeply. Freedom, in this sense, isn't loud or dramatic. It's soft, steady, and grounded. It's in the small moments. Drinking tea in silence without needing to talk. Letting your home reflect your spirit without compromise. Meditating at 3 a.m., if that's when your soul stirs. choosing rest over productivity because you finally trust that being is enough. And perhaps most importantly, this freedom allows you to build a life that's aligned with your deepest values, not the values handed to you by culture, family, or past relationships. You begin to live with integrity, not performance, with simplicity, not constant striving, with spaciousness, not survival. And in that space, you don't just find yourself, you find peace. Mindfulness practice, deepening presence through solitude. The more your life becomes simple and aligned with who you are, the more you begin to notice something you may have missed for years. The present moment, not just conceptually, but viscerally. You start tasting your food more deeply, feeling your breath more fully, hearing the subtle sound of the wind outside your window. And none of it feels ordinary anymore. It feels sacred. This is mindfulness, not as a technique, but as a way of being. And solitude, more than anything else, creates the perfect ground for mindfulness to grow. In the Buddhist tradition, mindfulness, sati, is a cornerstone of the path toward liberation. It means to see clearly, to be fully aware of what's happening as it happens, without resistance or clinging. But in the chaos of modern relationships and busy environments, true mindfulness often becomes fragmented, pulled in 10 different directions, always partial, always interrupted. When you live alone, you return to wholeness. There's no one calling your name mid-meditation. No one asking, "What's for dinner?" Just as you're trying to sit in silence. No emotional turbulence swirling through the room. Just the sound of your own breath, steady, unhurried, and the chance to fully inhabit yourself. You begin to rediscover ordinary moments as gateways to the sacred. Sweeping the floor becomes a form of walking meditation. Washing dishes becomes a sensory ritual. Lighting a candle in the evening becomes a silent offering to stillness itself. And slowly, the noise in your mind, the inner commentary, the judgment, the restlessness, begins to soften. Mindfulness and solitude isn't just about peacefulness, it's about truthfulness. Because when no one else is around, you see yourself more clearly. You notice your tendencies, how often your mind drifts, how easily you seek distractions, how long you've avoided certain feelings. But instead of judging, you begin to meet yourself with gentle awareness. This is the kind of mindfulness the Buddha taught. Not just attention, but a loving attentiveness. The ability to sit with a painful thought without running from it. The capacity to breathe through discomfort instead of escaping it. And the quiet wisdom to know that everything, joy, sadness, peace, fear, is just passing weather in the sky of your awareness. Living alone doesn't guarantee mindfulness, but it removes the layers of noise that so often block it. You're no longer performing for others. You're no longer managing someone else's emotions. You're simply here, raw, real, and awake. And here's the beautiful part. The more present you become with yourself, the more present you become with life. Suddenly you notice the softness in your own gaze. You feel compassion rising, not only for yourself, but for everyone around you. And when you do interact with others, it's from a place of grounded presence, not reactivity. Solitude becomes your practice hall. Your apartment becomes your monastery. Your daily rituals become walking meditations. You stop chasing intensity and begin trusting the quiet depth of presence. In a world obsessed with productivity and connection, mindfulness and solitude becomes a radical act, a return to being instead of becoming. And this kind of presence, it doesn't just bring peace. It becomes the foundation of your entire spiritual path. Because when you can sit alone in silence and feel complete, not lacking, not restless, not waiting, you've touched something eternal. Emotional independence. The quiet strength of facing yourself. As your mindfulness deepens, something subtle yet profound begins to unfold. You stop needing someone else to hold your emotions for you. For much of our lives, we're taught, often unconsciously, to reach outside ourselves when things feel heavy. We seek comfort in a partner's embrace, distraction in a friend's words, or validation in a loved one's praise. There's nothing wrong with being supported, but over time, that reliance can become a subtle form of avoidance. We don't learn to face our emotions. We learn to outsource them. But when you live alone, truly alone, you no longer have the luxury of leaning on someone else's presence to escape what's rising within. There's no one to fix your bad day. No one to fill the silence when sadness arrives. No one to reassure you that you're lovable, worthy, or enough. At first, this can feel overwhelming, like staring at a mirror you can't turn away from. But slowly, gently, that same mirror becomes your teacher. You begin to see that emotions, like waves, rise and fall on their own. You don't need to react. You don't need to run. You just need to breathe and be with them. In Buddhism, this is called equanimity, a deep inner balance that allows you to face life as it is, not as you wish it to be. It doesn't mean you suppress what you feel. It means you create space around it. You become the observer, the witness, the calm center within the storm. Emotional independence isn't about isolation. It's about inner resilience. It's the quiet power of knowing, I can feel this fully, and I will not break. When no one else is around, you begin to find comfort not in someone's words, but in your own breath. Not in a partner's reassurance, but in your own grounded presence. And slowly, your emotions stop feeling like enemies. They become messengers. Loneliness tells you where you've abandoned yourself. Anger shows you where your boundaries need care. Sadness reveals what you haven't grieved. And joy, quiet, subtle joy, begins to visit more often. Not because life is easier, but because you've stopped resisting what it is. This emotional maturity is one of the most liberating aspects of solitude. You no longer hand your peace over to someone else's behavior. You no longer depend on a partner's mood to feel okay. You learn to anchor inside, steady, patient, kind, and something else shifts. Because you no longer need someone to hold your pain, you also stop resenting them when they can't. You love more freely. You forgive more quickly. You don't burden others with the weight of making you feel better, because you've already given that gift to yourself. This isn't coldness. This is true intimacy, with yourself first, and then with others. Because when two emotionally independent people come together, they don't merge out of fear. They walk side by side, each whole in themselves, each strong enough to hold space for the other, without losing their center. Living alone gives you the sacred opportunity to develop that strength. It teaches you to trust your own presence, to comfort yourself without numbing, to face emotions without judgment, to befriend your inner world. And in a society that teaches us to chase distraction, external validation, and constant connection, this kind of emotional self-reliance is a quiet revolution. It's not about never needing anyone. It's about knowing that even when no one is there, you are present, capable, whole. Detachment from external validation. The freedom of no longer needing to be seen. Once you learn to face your emotions without relying on others to carry them, another layer begins to dissolve. The need to be validated. It's subtle, often invisible, and yet deeply woven into how we live. From early childhood, we're conditioned to seek approval. From parents, teachers, partners, society. We learn to associate our worth with how others see us, how they praise us, choose us, admire us, or acknowledge our presence. We dress a certain way. We speak in ways we think will be accepted. We shrink parts of ourselves that might not be liked, all in the hope of being seen, affirmed, and validated. But the deeper truth is this: the more we chase external validation, the further we move from ourselves. And so, the path of solitude, especially in the quiet honesty of living alone, invites a radical shift. You begin to see yourself without needing anyone else to agree. No one is there to applaud your progress. No one is watching your spiritual practice. No one is validating your worthiness with affection or attention. At first, this feels like emptiness. But slowly, it becomes a kind of freedom you didn't know you were craving. You realize that you can go for a walk, feel inspired, have insights, cry, smile, create beauty, and not need to share it, explain it, or post about it. You just live it, and it is enough. In Buddhist practice, this letting go is tied to the idea of non-attachment to ego, the self that wants to be special, noticed, approved of. The ego thrives on comparison and recognition, but the true self, the one resting beneath all that noise, thrives in quiet presence. Living alone removes the stage. No more performance, no more scripting your day around how it looks to others. Just your breath, your values, your pace, and something beautiful begins to happen. You stop measuring your life in likes, applause, or external milestones. You start measuring it in peace, authenticity, and depth. You listen more to what feels true than what looks impressive. You trust your own inner compass more than outside opinions. And eventually, you stop seeking approval. Not because you don't care, but because you already feel whole. This kind of detachment doesn't make you distant. It makes you deeply grounded. You become less reactive to praise or criticism. You stop bending yourself to fit roles that never suited you. You stop comparing your path with anyone else's. Because now, you're walking it with awareness. And here's the gift. When you no longer need validation, your relationships transform. You're no longer with someone to be seen. You're with them to connect. You're not performing love. You're practicing presence. You're not giving to get. You're giving because you overflow. This is the kind of freedom that solitude grants. The freedom to be unseen and still feel worthy. The freedom to be misunderstood and still feel clear. The freedom to be alone and still feel whole. In a world addicted to attention, this kind of self-assurance is rare. But it is the seed of true liberation. Because once you stop needing to be seen by others, you begin to see yourself fully, clearly, compassionately. And in that seeing, there's nothing left to prove. Just a quiet knowing. I am enough. I have always been. Inner peace. Beyond relationships. Coming home to yourself. There comes a moment in solitude, after you've faced your emotions, shed the need for validation, and return to your own breath. When something within you shifts. It's not a dramatic revelation. It's quiet, subtle, but it changes everything. You stop waiting, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be saved, waiting for someone else to make your life feel complete. And in that stillness, you realize something radical. You are already whole, not because someone said so, not because you achieved anything, but because you've come home to yourself. This is what Buddhism points to when it speaks of nibbana, not a place, but a state of release. Release from grasping, release from becoming, release from the endless hunger for things or people to fill you. It doesn't mean you won't ever love again. It doesn't mean you won't desire connection or companionship. It simply means that your center is no longer located outside of you. Relationships become a part of life, not the anchor of your identity. Love becomes something you offer, not something you chase. And being alone no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like peace. The truth is, many of us enter relationships not from wholeness, but from fear. We fear aging alone. We fear not being wanted. We fear that without someone beside us, our lives lose meaning. But when you've lived alone, truly alone, and discovered that your joy, your clarity, and your presence are still intact, those fears begin to fade. You no longer need someone to complete your story. You might choose to share it, but you know that you are already enough. This realization isn't just liberating, it's stabilizing. Because when relationships inevitably shift, as all things do, your peace remains untouched. It doesn't rise and fall with someone else's love. It lives deeper than that. You find yourself sitting in the evening silence, watching light filter through the window, and realizing, this is it. This is enough. No performance, no proving, just the sacred simplicity of being. And from that stillness, your life begins to take a different shape. You connect with others more authentically, because you're not trying to impress or hold on. You spend your time more intentionally, because you're no longer escaping yourself. You walk through the world with a quiet confidence, because you've touched something inside that doesn't shake. This is inner peace, not the fleeting high of romance or the comfort of constant company, but the steady warmth of coming home to your own presence, again and again. And here's the invitation. You don't have to wait until life forces you into solitude. You can choose it, not forever, not in rejection of love, but as a return to truth. Spend a season with yourself. Sit in silence without distraction. Let the emotions come and watch them go. Discover what remains when the noise fades. You might be surprised. You might find that what you've been searching for in others has quietly lived in you all along. If this message resonates with you, if you've ever felt the quiet pull toward living more simply, more mindfully, and more freely, know that you are not alone. Awakening Insights is here to support that journey. We create content for the soul, rooted in Buddhist wisdom, born from silence, and aimed at helping you live with more clarity, peace, and presence. So if you'd like to continue exploring these teachings with us, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your experience with solitude and self-discovery. And most of all, thank you for being here, for choosing depth over distraction, and for walking the quiet path, one breath at a time.